the professionals, the Catholic professionals that I see grow and take an idea from their head into a reality and a powerful force in our society are the people that say, I'm going to put in the work. I'm going to get this done. It will be me. I will look for help, but I will lead the effort. They take on the responsibility. They take on the ownership. Where the ones that don't thrive are the ones that have this idea and they're looking for somebody else to execute their idea.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Catholic Founders Podcast, where each week we are breaking down the tangible ways Catholic business owners can implement and integrate their faith into their businesses. I'm your host, Silas Maynor. One ask at the top here is take a moment to fill out the listener survey found in the description. This helps us know more about you and what you're looking for, and this way we can tailor the content more to what you're looking for. So today I am speaking with Cristofer Pereyra. I might be mispronouncing that slightly. It's a very difficult Peruvian name for me to get, but he is the founder and CEO of Tepeyac Leadership Initiative. I'm sure many of you have heard of this, and I wanted to have him on the show to ask him about how Catholics can engage bishops for projects like TLI, things that they want to get the bishop's kind of stamp of approval on to maybe get a little bit more promotion and they can carry the work out. That's all I'm going to share for now because I do provide more context in the interview itself. So get a pen and paper or open up a note taker on your phone because this is a very great episode with a lot of value packed into it. All right, enjoy. Welcome to the show, Cristofer. How are you doing today?
Good.
Super glad to have you. Where, for people who don't know you, where are you calling in from?
I am in Phoenix, Arizona. It is 6 a.m. in the morning.
And what's the temperature like these days? What is this? It's March 21st. We're recording this.
Yeah, well, gosh, don't ask me about degrees. I never know that.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair.
It is lovely. It is lovely here in Arizona, in Phoenix. The weather is just beautiful. People think that here we're burning ourselves
That's
year
what I
round,
think.
but in reality, is beautiful 9 or 10 months of the year, and we have to pay for that the remaining of the year.
Yes. I guess you got to have trade-offs everywhere, right? Right.
Yes.
Very good. Well, awesome. So you're joining us today. You're the founder of Tepeyac Leadership Initiative. This is a yearly cohort-based fellowship, and you can correct me if I got any of this wrong. A cohort-based fellowship to help turn Catholic professionals into genuine, at least the way I would describe it, genuine Catholic leaders in the world. And I guess I want to give a little bit of context to why we're bringing you on. So I'm currently going through the fellowship. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this. And there's discussions each week on kind of different topics. And one of the things that came up was that the church is separated into effectively units that are, the diocese. Each diocese is its own kind of unit in the church. And something, I don't know the exact kind of framing that the speaker had given, but we should be focusing on certain KPIs to increase, I guess you could say, the holiness or the engagement of each of our dioceses. And I thought it was an interesting way to put it because most people think about their involvement in the faith usually either on their own basis, just on an individual basis, or with their parish, right? Not necessarily the entire diocese. So I really like that framing. And what I was starting to think about with part of the project we're doing here with Catholic Founders is how exactly could a person engage a bishop to get some projects done? Because not many bishops, I would say, nowadays view their role as one of more of like the business objectives, or like we're trying to achieve a certain outcome or a KPI with our diocese, and they also don't have a lot of time. However, there are many faithful people who would more than likely be happy to carry out those objectives, but they need to engage the bishop and kind of get their blessing. And you have done this. You have done this with TLI. So that's why we're bringing you on today, is to kind of learn from you on how can we as Catholic business people engage the bishop. So I guess if I forgot this, I think that's the context there. Give us, before we get too far into it, give us a little bit of backstory on yourself. Don't spoil the parts of founding TLI. Just tell us a little bit kind of about, your backstory and your career and how you got to TLI.
Okay, so originally from Peru, live in the United States since I was 15, married to a beautiful Mexican lady by the name of Carla, and father of 4, 2 adults and 2 teens. And I have a very eclectic mix of work experiences. In the past, I have been a television news reporter for a Spanish network. And then I went into business. I owned a real estate broker firm and an insurance brokerage firm. a few years back, and I was doing just fine when I found myself called to serve God through service of the Diocese of Phoenix, and I was offered in 2014, like I told my wife, I was offered the job I never knew I always wanted. I dropped everything to work for the Diocese of Phoenix as the director of the Hispanic Mission Office. At the Diocese of Phoenix, while I was serving as the director of the Hispanic Mission Office, my office developed a program. We'll talk more about that, but a program that once founded and first carried out, executed, and graduated the first class in 2018, we realized we had something special on our hands, something unique. And so with the blessing of the bishop, we took the program out of the diocese. It became its own 501c3, its own independent apostolate. The bishop gave us canonical status and his blessing so that we could share it with the rest of the church in the United States and beyond. And we just never expected the beyond to get here so quickly.
Yeah, that's a fair point. So I guess backing up a little further, when you were young, like, did you have big ambitions to do something like this early in life? Like, where did this come from, or was it just something that kind of smacked you over the head later on?
I think I was always ambitious, the good kind of ambition, right? I always wanted to do something with my life. Early on, the first goal I had all throughout high school, I wanted to be a film director. That's what I wanted to do. That was the original plan. So that began to adjust little by little. But I always knew that some people have a hard time speaking about the fact that they have gifts. I don't, because I understand the true meaning of humility. Humility really doesn't mean putting ourselves down. Many people in the church know this, but not everybody. Humility means seeing ourselves as we are, with our shortcomings, flaws, and our gifts and talents, everything that God has given us. So I understood from an early age, as I know many people do, that I had some gifts, I had some talents, there was an innate thirst to lead, really to lead. Now I look at my life back, and in college, at the university, at Arizona State University, I started a film club, and then throughout my life, I was always starting these things. I was always starting these groups and things and clubs, and so I realized God was preparing me for something like this a long time ago, even though I didn't know it. Now the genesis of the program is different, because I never planned on putting together a leadership program. I feel that I stumbled into this, that now I identify as my mission that God has given.
Did you, when you visualize the idea of, you say wanting to make something of yourself and wanting to achieve things, what did that look like at a young age? Like when you were kind of in your early, let's say, early 20s?
Yeah, film director. Up until the early 20s, it was still film director. I wanted to make just awesome films, the films that we all grew up with. I thought that, I thought that I was meant to be in Hollywood, winning an Oscar or two.
Yeah.
Films. That's what I thought. Along the way, like I said, I had to adjust, because we make plans and then life happens and we realize that the university that I go to doesn't have a film major. So what is the closest thing to that? Okay, so I switched to radio and television production. Then I switched to journalism, which is eventually what I was settling for. And then when I started working on television, actually as a journalist, I realized that what I was being taught was really outdated compared to the real world, where I was already being, practicing the journalist career. So I ended up graduating with a bachelor's in history, because I think, listen, I gotta graduate and get this done, and I had enough credits. I loved history, so that was it. Much later, I got a master's in business administration, which has come very handy for the work that I'm doing right now.
Was your faith always very important to you, or was there ever a period of time where that was not like the most in focus piece of your life?
I would say that my relationship with God, with Christ, started at an early age, and that was always important. Not my faith. I didn't even understand the faith. I didn't know the faith. The truth is that I was born in a Catholic family in Peru, and it was a culturally Catholic family. So we were Catholic because what else are you going to be in Peru? Everybody else is Catholic, right? So we had all our sacraments, but we never really went to mass unless it was somebody else's turn to get their sacraments or a funeral, unfortunately. And so it was like that. But my mom did teach me when I was little. I remember at a young age, did teach me to pray. And later, as a teen, I met this girl at school who was a Protestant. She was an evangelical. Through my friendship with her, I actually started to pray. As you know, I was now consciously praying and reaching out to God. And she made me aware of the reality of God. Now I wasn't any longer a child. And I always kept that, but never really practiced the faith. When I came to the United States and I went through college, the truth is that through my college years, I was as far away from practicing my faith as I could ever have been. Did some things I'm not proud of. But it was the marriage preparation program at the Diocese of Phoenix, a phenomenal 6 to 9 month preparation program that all of the couples are upset, and we were too, when they learned that they have to go through. And then we're so grateful when we come out of it, because it really, I mean, that's what it did to me. It brought me back to the faith.
That's amazing. No, I love that. I think I grew up going mostly to traditional Latin mass, and we still have very rigorous marriage prep. And I think I was a little bit surprised at some of my friends who were like, "Oh, it's like a 2-day retreat, and that's it." And I was like, "What?" We had to meet with the priest like every month for quite some time. It did everything, but no, that's really great. I love that. And then when you decided, okay, we're starting to get into the TLI story here, but when you realized that this was something to kind of begin pursuing, it's a relatively, again, you sounded like you didn't have as big of ideas of what it would become, but it is still a relatively big idea, even at the smaller version of it. So how did you determine, and this maybe goes into that comment you made about gifts, how did you determine if the ambition was something genuinely from God or kind of your own pride to want to be able to do something big?
Yeah, no, I think that by the time I was serving Bishop Olmsted at the Diocese of Phoenix, where we developed the program, I didn't have a lot of pride left, because, I mean, I'm sure we all have a little left that we still need to get rid of. But the thing is that I learned by suffering. I don't know how you learned, Silas, but I learned. You know how I learned? I don't learn by having somebody tell me the right thing to do. I don't listen well. And I only learn when I don't pay attention to the good advice that I'm being given. I make a mistake, I suffer, and that's how I learned. And by the time I was working for the diocese and developing the program, I had suffered a great deal in my personal life. I had gone through some pretty tough stuff that made me realize I am not the center of the world. I am not in control. I am nothing, and I am useless if I don't hold on to God and make Him the center of my life. I was already convinced of that. So I didn't develop this program out of pride. I developed this program out of I think a zeal, a really, I have this fire in me that just wants to see God glorified. I want to bring Him back to every space where He rightly belongs. Right? We have rejected and really canceled God from so many areas of human activity, of society, and that is just wrong, because He owns everything. This is His world, right? And so I talk about, this is the language I use in my work. I talk about bringing back Christendom. I talk about, and I tell people, I'm not talking about a fantasy of going back to the Middle Ages. I'm talking about building a Christian civilization for the 21st century. That's what I want to see. That's what gets me excited. And so all of these thoughts, a frustration with the things that are going wrong in the culture, in education, in healthcare, in so many areas, all of the transgressions against the dignity of the human person. This is what was going on in my mind and in my heart when I thought of developing this program.
Mm-hmm. Very good. No, I appreciate that. That's a really, really good perspective. And I definitely have to clip that, the Christendom for the 21st century. That's amazing. So tell us then, I guess, the story of TLI. And then kind of as we go through here, I might interrupt you periodically to ask about the engaging the bishop aspect. But tell us kind of that story after you joined the diocese to work on that program and then building out TLI.
Absolutely. So the program, the origin story, I'm going to try to be brief because it's long, but the diocese sent me in 2016. The diocese said to me, listen, there's a program in the community. Most organizations, institutions in the community who want to be present in what's happening, send somebody to participate. So we're going to send you. It was a secular civic leadership development program in Phoenix. I participated in this program, being obedient. My diocese sent me. I was one of 30 people representing the only institution of faith. Every other institution represented was nonprofit, for-profit, every sector represented, men and women, all ethnic backgrounds. But I was the only person of faith and the only institution of faith being represented and the only person of faith in the program. Going through the program opened up my eyes to this reality of civic leadership development in the United States, which really has been around since the 70s and sort of under the radar. And I thought, gosh, what is this? And I realized there's such a thing as the National Association of Leadership Programs. It has about 200 members, and these members are large nonprofit organizations. All of these are secular. And I also realized that unfortunately, most of these programs are forming leaders with values that run directly opposed to Catholic teaching.
Yeah, this is something, just like jump in here really quickly, that it's very interesting to me that we have just accepted. I mean, we let it go by the wayside that there's so many of these things that are, in the business world, trainings of, principles, all these things that are not based on truth. And how can you have something that is not based on, the actual truth of the situation? So I appreciate you noticing this. It's kind of crazy to me that we went into this time of year, the 21st century before we had something like this.
And it's interesting that something that is not based on truth, like you're saying, can hold up as it does. So it was really a no-brainer when I thought, gosh, what if we had our own Catholic leadership program? Because the idea of forming leaders is a noble concept. It's a good idea. Who would be opposed to forming leaders? So I brought this, coming out of the program, a little frustrated with the experience. I brought this to my bishop. And together, that led into a series of conversations where him and we developed Tepeyac Leadership Initiative. As far as we know, the only Catholic leadership development program that has this very specific, very, very focused objective of forming Catholics for leadership in civil society. Very concretely, this translates in things like board service, philanthropy, just being an ambassador of Christ in the world.
Mm-hmm. And then, so were you only able to do this because you had that already direct access to the bishop because you were working in the diocese? Like, how might somebody who is not in working for the diocese kind of go about engaging a bishop on something like this?
Yeah, I can answer both questions. So in my case, yeah, I was already at the diocese, so I would meet with Bishop Olmsted on a regular basis. So all I had to do is just pitch, right? But really, if we can go to the question that you want to answer, because I've had people over the years with lots of ideas. This is a beautiful thing about the United States. I've noticed now that I've been traveling more for the work that I do that is now international, I notice this I think that you can go anywhere in the world and you'll find people who have an entrepreneurial spirit. But this is my opinion, I don't think any other nation can compete with the entrepreneurial spirit of the United States. I think there's something about this country that we're very entrepreneurial. We want to start things. And this entrepreneurial spirit transfers over even to the apostolate, because what we have here in the United States, many people are not aware, but this, this world, this beautiful church that we have in this country, where there are so many apostolates, you name it, there is an apostolate doing something for that, addressing that issue, that space here in the United States. You don't see that in every country. You see a few, but you don't have the dynamism, the energy, the resources that are actually real resources that are injected into these apostles. So I have a lot of people approach me and ask me, how do I get started, Cristofer? And the thing is, like you said, bishops are busy. And unless you already are someone who is involved in your diocese and have a high profile, you're not going to so easily get an opportunity, because bishops have to discern. They can't just see anyone that just has an idea. So the best way to get started really is at your parish. So a bishop will be more ready to listen to you, support you, if you already have a developed relationship with your priest, with your parish priest. So I would say to anybody that has an idea for an apostolate to first develop a relationship with their own priest at their parish, wherever they're registered, wherever they go to mass, or whatever the case might be. And maybe share your project, your vision with that priest. Maybe invite him to be the chaplain, to be the spiritual director, ecclesiastical advisor, or accompaniment for whatever you're doing. And once you have that support, what you're going to do is he's going to ensure that what you're doing is, first of all, orthodox, faithful to the magisterium. And, that would be a first important step. And you don't need to go to the bishop right away. Why would we go to the bishop for something that's nothing but an idea? We have to first develop it. We have to think of our time at the parish level as the incubator stage.
Mm-hmm. It's your MVP.
Yes. Grow that idea, develop it a little bit, right? And then once you have something, go with the bishop if you feel that that's the next step, if that's the endorsement that you think that will be helpful. But I will submit to you that you can go a long way without knocking on the bishop's door, so that when you do, it's he'll feel like he understands. Yes, I know why you felt it was time for you to come here. So don't rush. Make sure that you are well supported by your parish priest. And then when you're ready, you can approach the bishop.
Hey everyone, if you are looking to hire some support in your business, perhaps you're looking for a virtual assistant or need some extra help and you can't afford to hire somebody locally in the United States, my executive assistant and I are actually trying something out. We're calling it Paraclete VA. And the premise is that in the Philippines, there are many Catholic virtual assistants who work for employers that are not exactly ethical, or who kind of ask them to do things that are not exactly in alignment with their Catholic morals. So they're looking for a change. They can't exactly afford to just quit their jobs. They need to put food on the table. So many of Karen's friends have actually asked her about, do they know any other Catholic business owners that they could work for? So that's what we're trying to do. If you're looking to hire an offshore talent, consider hiring a Catholic and changing the life of an entire family. If you're interested in doing so, this is how it works. You reach out to us with a little bit of what you're looking for, and then we will go and find somebody that makes sense for you to talk to. If you hire them, we charge a flat $500 for that introduction. And then if you are still happy with them after 30 days, we charge another $500. The way you can do this is reach out to myself or Karen. That's Silas at earthtechtalent.com or Karen at earthtechtalent.com. That is earth with no A, ERTH, techtalent.com. And we'll make an introduction. We'll go from there. Just do keep in mind that we are not an employer of record. So you will pay these people directly. We'll help facilitate best practices there. But we are not an employer of record. So again, if you are hiring a virtual assistant, consider doing it through Paraclete VA to hire a Catholic one and change a family's life today. So what about the perspective that if somebody's dealing with a bishop who doesn't necessarily kind of view, like we said, view things in the terms of KPIs, for example, how do you get them to bless something? So if you've got something going on, it's working all right, but their mentality is not necessarily that they are a leader that's been, placed by God in the society to help bring people closer to God. Is there, ways that you can kind of get them to perceive that? Because I'll give an example here. What I thought about when we had this discussion was, imagine if in Wisconsin, where I am, there's 5 bishops. Imagine if even one of them was very, very thoroughly convinced of this idea of setting KPIs and getting kind of more coordination. They can probably relatively easily get an audience with the rest of the bishops in the state and say, hey, us 5, we're going to work really hard for the next 2 years to achieve this particular outcome, and hopefully that'll be a model for other people to do, because they can coordinate, and there's a lot of kind of benefit from the shared effort. And if that works really well for 2 years, you see the fruits of it, and then any other bishop who's not kind of got their head buried in the sand is going to say, oh, what's going on in Wisconsin there, and then they might coordinate. So the whole point here is that with several people rather than hundreds of people, you can actually get a coordinated effort to go forward. So how do you kind of get them interested in this way of viewing their role in the world, of being a leader and being courageous, rather than kind of being a little bit tepid about not stepping on anybody's toes?
Yeah, well, from my experience, I will tell you that it's not an easy thing to get a bishop to move and invest themselves into a project or an idea in the way that you're describing. For that to happen, you would actually have to be someone who has been involved with the diocese in a leadership capacity. So these things really, the Catholic Church moves very slowly. The Catholic Church moves slowly, and it is like that for a reason. That's the way our Lord designed it, and things happen very slowly. We can think of the Catholic Church more as a government, a bureaucratic, not the most efficient, but a holy, yet holy,
A holy bureaucracy.
a holy bureaucracy, than a business. And I worked at the diocese, and a healthy diocese, a good diocese, a very efficient diocese, that still, that reality remains for it. So that's just what it is. And I think that oftentimes we might feel that we need the participation of the bishop for our whatever vision is, more than we actually do so. What I mean is that many times, if you ran some of these ideas by a bishop, he would say, why don't you just do it? Why do you need me? Many times this is going to be his reaction. So as long as what you're doing is in line with the magisterium, as long as what you're doing is orthodox, is faithful, we don't really need to be bugging the bishop much, Silas. And I'm sorry if this isn't perhaps what you're looking for, but the reality is that let's think about why we need a bishop to back up a project or initiative or new apostolate, whatever we're doing. We need his blessing. We need his endorsement. At some point, when we get to a certain stage, not early on, we can't back the bishop with just a fresh idea. But if we're thinking about resources, forget it. The diocese and the church is overspent. They already have plenty. If we think our idea is so cool, it will just transform the church, forget it. The diocese already has pastoral plans, and they're already working, and they have their own projects, and they're so busy. So what we need is to take on the ownership ourselves and say, I believe in this. I think I can make this a reality. I'll surround myself with other lay people who have a more of a flexibility and dynamism, because we're in the world to make things happen. And this goes back to the entrepreneurial spirit that I was referring to earlier. Only when we've grown to a stage where we definitely, if we're going to present ourselves as a Catholic institution, we need to have the backing of a bishop. At that stage, we have that conversation, but primarily to have their endorsement, their blessing. Even if we're going to get a canonical status or something that makes it more official, yes, all of that is good. But in order to develop and make an idea fly and take off, we can do that on our own, and that's perfectly fine. That's what the church teaches us.
Yeah.
That is precisely what our duty is, to take care of these things, to renew the temporal order, to sanctify these realities. So I think we might feel that we need the bishop more than we actually do, and for things that we actually don't need him.
Yeah, that's a really good perspective. I do appreciate that, your view of that. And I want to ask a little bit about what exactly is a canonical blessing, and I guess kind of along with that, who are the characters, if you will, or the people that need to be involved? It sounds like obviously get something that's working generally, and be involved with your priest. But are there any other characters that need to be involved in order to kind of go to this point of achieving that canonical blessing?
Yeah. So a canonical status, which is what TLI has of private juridic person, is something that's granted by the tribunal in your diocese. So the effort has to be, like I said, has to be mature enough and well thought of enough by the bishop to be considered for it, because it's a process. You don't need to have it to be a legitimate Catholic organization. What I'm saying is that I would say that most apostolates do not have a canonical status. And they still call themselves Catholics, as long as they're faithful, because the people that ran them are Catholic. They're not going to have a bishop come out and remove their Catholic status, which they can do. So a bishop can say, this organization that is calling itself Catholic is not Catholic. You know, if you don't give him a reason to do it, he will not do such a thing. If you're doing good, right, they judge, bishops will judge a tree by its fruits. If you are producing good fruit, a bishop will simply pray for you. He will be very encouraged by seeing what you're doing, even though you haven't come under the fold of the diocese in a formal manner, because these things are proper to the laity. It is proper to the laity to find creative ways to evangelize the world. So the bishops want this. They expect it. They're overjoyed when they see it happening. But some apostolates, some initiatives might grow to a certain place that this endorsement might make sense. And so having that conversation with the bishop begins the process of getting a canonical status through the tribunal at the diocese. And they're different depending on the organization. The church has different types of status depending on what you do. Maybe you are a school, maybe you are a university, a hospital, you're a clinic, you are so many things, so many types of projects that somebody could be working on might receive a different type of canonical status. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, got it. So, and then are there any core characteristics of the projects themselves that you would need to have kind of be true in order for you eventually, for a bishop to say, hey, this is interesting, we're willing to move this forward? Like, are there any core things? Does it have to be a nonprofit? Does it have to be like any kind of key considerations there?
I think that most apostolates, and especially when they have a canonical status, will probably have also the non-profit status. I don't believe that I'm not a canon lawyer, so I definitely cannot give you the ultimate advice on this. I myself had to do a little research to gain our own, but I know that there can perfectly be a Catholic business that is for profit and still be Catholic if the owners are Catholic. But again, it might not necessarily need to have a canonical status. There's got to be a reason why you need it. Like I said, most apostolates, Catholic lay-led apostolates, probably don't have it and don't need it, right? But in our case, we were thinking nationally, we were thinking globally. So it was rather important. So you have to think about that as well. If this is something you're working on, something that's really going to stay within the boundaries of your parish or diocese, maybe you don't necessarily need to go through all of that. Yeah.
Maybe not. Yeah. Are there, so, I think for somebody who's not familiar at all with what it's like to be working in a diocese, and especially because I grew up going into, Institute of Christ the King, so it's technically an apostolate that's kind of, not a whole lot of engagement with the diocese itself, right? I'm always curious to know, what are the things that bishops really have to care about or consider, because from an outside perspective, you say, okay, it's the benefit of their flock, trying to make sure people are holy, guiding them. But are there other considerations that are kind of very important for that they have to keep in mind, similar to the way a politician has to be worried about certain things? Are there other things that bishops have in the back of their mind as they're doing things that, if anybody wants to engage them, they should be aware of those considerations?
Yeah, I think people probably have very little idea of how much, unfortunately, of their time, bishops have to spend in crisis management. The church is just this huge institution, and it's a living organism, but in practical matters, it's just this huge institution that has to be managed at so many different levels. So bishops are dealing with crisis management all the time, and all kinds of crises. I mean, people will think about things like the sex abuse scandal, which was and it continues to be a big one. But that's not the only thing that can create a crisis. There can be a crisis of any type, of human resources, of people, of finances, of all kinds of things, because there's just so much to manage, right? And so a bishop probably wishes that he could spend more time on his pastoral plan and vision, and they do, but they probably wish they could spend more time on that than they actually end up doing, because they have to manage all of these crises that are constantly coming their way. The larger the diocese, the more. So people need to understand that the bishops have so many things in their head. That's why we cannot go and bug a bishop with an idea that just came up, and it's nothing because it's just on our head. I mean, and it might be a beautiful idea, but work on it, grow it, and once it actually represents a force, then that's the time when you can think about bringing it in front of the bishop.
Mm-hmm. So on the other side, I've been asking, how do you engage a bishop? What if there's a person who's building a business or building some kind of endeavor that's, whether it's a for-profit or it's some kind of just generally, mission oriented thing that's kind of helping to bring Catholicism around or promote it. If they have in their head had no idea or no interest in engaging their priest even, or their bishop, and they're just kind of thinking about doing this thing on their own, they haven't considered the idea of kind of involving the church more directly, what would you say to those people who are kind of just, doing their own thing?
Yeah, I would say that either extreme is dangerous and is not healthy. So if we think that we're gonna go with an idea to our bishop and basically would like our bishop to execute our idea, we're dreaming. Like I said, bishops are busy and they have plenty on their plate. We can and should develop our own ideas. But the other end of saying, no, I could just fly solo, is not healthy either. We should stay close to the church. We should stay connected to the church and to the structures of the church and to the clergy and leadership in the church. And at the very least, through a priest, through our own priest, I would say. And we need to everybody needs a spiritual director. Every Catholic needs a spiritual director. Every apostolate needs a chaplain or spiritual director. So at the personal level, if you're the leader of your apostolate, you need one. And then if you are surrounded by a group of people, volunteers, whoever make up your effort or movement, that body of people also needs a chaplain or apostolate. At the very least, we need that support. We don't need much more than that. So for the actual planning, execution, and all of these things, that's us. That's our turf. That's the laity. So we don't really need to go to the magisterium, to the hierarchy of the church, to the clergy, to the leadership of the church, to get support in those things.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think this is a good call. I guess I think very, very concretely, if anybody is a Catholic business owner and they're trying to genuinely run their business in a Catholic way, if you don't have a spiritual director, it sounds like you better get on that. What have been the biggest challenges in building and growing TLI? Things that you think people should be aware of if they're doing things, or lessons that they can take away from this.
Oh, thank you for that question, because the first thing I gotta say to someone is, to people thinking about starting something, is that you can't do something as a hobby and expect for it to actually become something big, something impactful. It doesn't work that way. So many people come to me and say and ask me, "Hey, listen, I have this idea. I'm just working on it on the side, but I think we can grow it to the point where it becomes this." And and they have this big vision, but they're treating their project as a hobby, and they think that it can turn into that vision by continuing to keep it as a hobby. Building an apostolate, which ultimately is an entrepreneurial activity, it takes a lot of work, a lot of time. What I do for TLI, this is my full time, and I work overtime all the time. I invest. There is God, there's my family, and then I pour myself into this, and that's the only way. And and we're only here. We're at least we're still at our fetal stage. That's what it takes. So if you really want to do something, you got to think about how much time and resources and of yourself are you willing to pour into it. Because if you're not going to go in, you're really just going to be wasting people's time. You're going to be wasting the time of all of the stakeholders, the donors, the receptors, the recipients of whatever it is that you're going to provide. You're just wasting their time, really, because it's never going to really take off until you're ready to invest yourself into it. And you can ask this of anybody, any of the people that have built these incredible apostolates in the United States, like Focus, Life Team, Legatus, the big ones, the ones that really have a tremendous impact. It's not a hobby to them. That's the way it gets done. So that's the first consideration. It takes a lot of time and a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in other words, don't assume that you can create some big impact without some big effort, right? They have to be equally. You have encountered many Catholic professionals through doing this initiative, obviously, and I'm kind of curious, what are the common, I guess, traits or characteristics that people tend to possess, or if you've noticed any themes of the people who tend to really lead and push the limits, so that if anybody's listening, they can develop those as well?
Yeah, I think that this attitude that I will do something about this is what's needed, because what we have too often is we have good Catholics, faithful Catholics, well-formed, practicing Catholics who are at home watching television or watching the news on their phone, whatever the case might be, seeing something, seeing a problem, seeing an issue of concern in society. They're frustrated, and they're thinking, why doesn't the Pope do something about this? Why doesn't my bishop do? Why doesn't my priest just do something about this? Why doesn't someone do something about that? That is the wrong attitude to have, because when we are having those thoughts, what's happening right there is the Lord is telling us, I want you to do something about this. And people don't listen to that. Or maybe they do, they just reject that thought. They just continue to project it into others. When we see something that ought to be done, and we're clear that this is what should be done, that right there should be a pretty clear sign that we are the ones that should do it. I think that's something that's needed today. And the professionals, the Catholic professionals that I see grow and take an idea from their head into a reality and a powerful force in our society, are the people that say, I'm going to put in the work. I'm going to get this done. It will be me. I will look for help, but I will lead the effort. They take on the responsibility. They take on the ownership. Where the ones that don't thrive are the ones that have this idea and they're looking for somebody else to execute their idea. And sometimes that's why they want the bishop, because they want the bishop to execute their idea. The bishop is busy. The bishop cannot be executing everybody's ideas. We need to build on the ideas that God has given us.
This is why I think entrepreneurship is so important, because it's that desire or that unwillingness to kind of sit still, that
Absolutely.
you have to do something, you have to start something, because the doing is the part that matters, right? It's the ideas are worthless, execution is everything, right? And this is something I finally made the leap and started my own business about a year ago, and I've noticed that, right? I have so many ideas, but the ideas don't matter, right? I gotta do the work to actually keep my business growing and keep it moving by really committing and doing things. This is something maybe you have any reflections on, but to me, the doing aspect is a core characteristic of being Catholic, right? Because it's like, if you truly believe and you truly understand your faith and what Jesus did for us, how can you not act?
And this should be our attitude, right? Pray as if everything depended on God, but do as if everything depended on you. There's a reason why every time Jesus performed a miracle, if you remember from the scriptures, he always required of the person being the recipient of the miracle to take a few steps. At the very least, do you believe I can do this? Can you invest faith into this? Can you? So he required some action from us. He required something, and then he didn't need to. He certainly doesn't need us to do something, but he always asked of that that we did something, right? And so it continues to be true. We need to work hard, and this is something I have learned in my work, that the Lord will bless our work when we put in the work. He will bless it. In other words, the results are all His. The fruit is all His, right? We're just instruments. We're just. But if we want things to happen, we have to put in the work, and then believe, and then really trust that He will bless it, and He will bless it. He does. He blesses it when we put in the work.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. So to wrap us up, you already talked about it a little bit, but if somebody is thinking about, they have an idea to do something, and they know they actually got to do something about it. It can't just be an idea that somebody else executes for them, but they have a hesitancy that it's too risky. They've got kids, they've got a family. It's too risky for them to start. What would your words to those people be?
Yes. Well, you have to consider all of these things. You have to really do discernment. People need to have a spiritual director. This is very important, and a lot of Catholics are lacking on that. So if you have all those things in place, and you're doing a true discernment, thinking as you think in human terms of a business plan and an idea, what it takes, the risks, and then in spiritual plans, in the spiritual field, thinking about the fruit that could come from it, and whether God truly is calling you to it. I don't know, it's not easy for people to really discern, is this something that God really is calling me for? Or is just something that I think is cool, and it would be really cool to see developed? We have to really be ready to answer to ourselves and be honest with ourselves. If the answer to that question is no, God is not necessarily asking me to build this. I just think it would be a cool thing. In my case, certainly for TLI, I feel that I never planned for it. I never desired it. It really came my way. But true discernment is necessary. We need to have a spiritual director. We need to pray. We need to be people of prayer. You're learning, and will continue to learn, that without a plan of life, a plan of spiritual life, which is a really consistent, structured life of prayer and sacraments, without that, we're really useless, or we are not as effective as we can be for building the kingdom. But if we have a structured prayer and sacramental life, the support of a priest, we are in a position where we can listen to God, and we can really, really discern our decisions, make our decisions that way. Because to answer the original question, somebody who has a wife and kids and a lot of risk can be called by God to do something, which is definitely my case, can be called by God to do something really risky, and the Lord will have his back, and it will go on and get to where God wants it to get. But for some people, it might just be a pipe dream, really. They're not serious about it. They're not serious in terms of the planning of the project. They're not, or the idea, they're not really realistic. They're not serious about their spiritual life. And if they're not serious about their spiritual life, I'm not talking about perfection. We're not talking about that. There's no perfect here. There's only one that's perfect. But being serious about your spiritual life, then forget it. Forget that. That's like the very basic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in other words, to try to summarize that, there are people who are called, and they have to discern that and know that it's true. Because if it is true, if God is genuinely calling you, how can you be afraid, right? He will have your back. But if you're doing it perhaps for other reasons, or you're not serious about it, it's just something you want to have an impact, you might have to discern that and weed it out and realize that this is not the right thing for me. So very good. Well, I appreciate this very much, Cristofer. This has been a pleasure. I would love to chat with you more. We'll have to have you on again to discuss other topics, because you've got such a wealth of knowledge here. But thank you so much for coming on. Any calls to action or final things that you would leave the audience with?
No, I was just insisting on the last piece of advice I shared, because it really is. It's at the heart of everything. As Catholics, we are so practicing faithful Catholics. We want to see God's kingdom here on earth come and get everywhere and be everywhere. We want to see. We have this vision that we'd like to see realized. But before we start doing things, we got to invest in our interior life. That's the first step. And the mistake that many Catholics make is to get really busy at the parish, at the diocese, getting involved with so many things. We sign up for everything. We say, yes, 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 yes. We're so busy. We set up a tent and camp at the parish sometimes. But that's not our calling. That's not the authentic character of the lay vocation. We got to start investing in our interior life and committing to continuous growth. And then we go out. And our primary field of mission is the world, not the parish. The parish is where we go to strengthen ourselves with the continuous reception of the sacraments. But then we go out to the world.
Well, that's a really good point. We should have put that sooner. Our primary mission is to the world, not to the parish. I love that. Very good, Cristofer. Well, this has been a pleasure. Like I said, we'll have you on again sometime, but thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Silas.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in today. If you're enjoying this content, give us 5 stars on your favorite podcast player. And if you want to get more involved, consider becoming a paid supporter. It's $10 a month or $100 a year. And if you want to support even more in a meaningful way, you can become a member of the Magis Club by selecting your contribution level. There will be special perks that go along with this. That's not exactly fully determined yet, but we will roll them out eventually. Thank you so much for considering financial support of this show and this effort. God bless and happy building. We'll see you next time.